particular. And so we looked to the Lord to, and I've been wondering how I was going to do this, because I knew the two chapters were actually saying the same thing, just in different ways. And I didn't see any need in us taking 2 Wednesdays and just going over the same material again. But there's a reason it's in the Bible, and I think we ought to take note of that while we're studying these 2 different chapters. Here we have a major historic event that is told to us, and it's in 2 literary forms. Chapter number 4 is what they call in literature prose, P-R-O-S-E. And chapter 5 is poem or poetry. And so chapter number 5 is a poetic version of chapter number 4. Chapter 4 just states the historic facts, the facts as they are. It tells the story and the narrative as to what took place. And so this is the historical account. And then in the next chapter, because of what God did that we read about in chapter 4, somebody found it to be worth singing about. And so that's exactly what is done in that 5th chapter. They sing about what took place in chapter number 4. And as they sing about what took place in chapter 4, they're doing the right thing. They're giving credit where credit is due. They're singing and praising and honoring God for what He did in chapter number 4. And of course, the people who are doing the singing are the outstanding characters in chapter number 4. And so they've been right out there in the middle of all of this historic occasion, and they know what has been going on, and they know, speaking as the world does, they know the odds that were against them in chapter number 4. And so it just thrilled them. It thrilled them to know that God would so demonstrate His power and His presence, that He would so aid them as they were up and about God's business, doing what God had called upon them to do. And so the lady who's involved here, Deborah, as far as I can tell, it seems like anyway, I think most people agree that Deborah probably wrote that song, and she and Barak sung that song together unto the Lord. And so it's a very beautiful song, and it is somewhat a repeat of the historic verses in chapter 4, but it is done with poetry, with beautiful poetry. Sometimes poetry is easy to understand, and sometimes I can't hardly put one line of it into rational understanding, because a lot of it comes deep from within the poet. And it's kind of like abstract paintings sometimes. You look at an abstract, and the painter has given a name which is supposed to fit the paint that is just thrown in every different direction and all kinds of colors. It may not make much sense to you, but it does to the poet, to the artist, if indeed he is an art expert or an expert painter. And I learned that when I took art classes, and don't suppose by that I can paint or that I can draw. But I did learn some things about what at least went on in the mind of people who are able to do that. But anyway, that's the way some of chapter 5 is. There's a little bit, it's a little bit difficult in some areas, but when you know the history and what she had on her mind, that makes it a lot easier to grasp the poetry as well. Now, I'm going to call this 4th chapter, together with the 5th chapter, Fearless Female Fighters. Fearless female fighters. Sometimes we talk of women being ladylike and being soft and meek and humble. And then sometimes even those ladylike women, if you cross them in particular areas of their life, they just may light into you and give you a bad day. And you know, when you deal with some ladies' children or their husband or their pastor, they'll light into you. And so, and there is a need for that at times. Meekness does not necessarily mean weakness. And we've got to keep that in mind, because some of the strongest people that has ever been has been by nature a meek people. I've already mentioned the fact that Moses is referred to in the Scriptures as the meekest man on the earth. But that didn't mean he didn't have a temper. And that didn't mean that he didn't oppose and stand firm against rebellion and sin and the like. And so, ladies, I encourage you to be ladylike, but I also encourage you to be defensive when it's necessary to take place. I think it was the world heavyweight champion boxer back in the 50s? I think it was 40s or 50s, Jack Dempsey. I think it was him who said the most powerful defense is a solid punch, a knockout punch. He said that's guaranteed that they won't hit you again. And so sometimes it is necessary. And we find what is taking place in the book of Judges, a time when it's necessary for everybody to be strong. It's time for all hands on deck for that kind of an attitude. That's the kind of days that we're presently living in. Yes, let's be meek, let's be humble, let's not go out looking for a fight or picking fights. But I do say when the time comes, when the occasion comes, and there is a time for peace, but there is also a time for war. There's a time for fighting. And we are known in the Scriptures as soldiers. We are called that in the Word of God. In 2 Timothy 2, Paul tells us to endure hardness as good soldiers of Jesus Christ. And because if you are a child of God, if you are associated with the Lord Jesus Christ, then you can expect hardness. And anybody in our day and hour, the way things are and the rebellion that is exploding in these days, anybody who is not experiencing hardness is either a lost church member or terribly, terribly backslidden, cold in heart and indifferent. Because I'm convinced that this is the day to draw the sword. This is the day to face the enemy. Satan is on a rampage. I think that he believes that his time is short, and I certainly believe it. And what he's going to do, it's kind of like Judas Iscariot. When Jesus told him on his final night, he said, "What thou doest, do quickly. Get at it, because you only have a little time left in this world yourself." And so we don't want to fight, but if we have to, we do. And so let's try to learn from these verses of Scriptures. Deborah is I said I'm titling it Fearless Female Fighters, and there are two that are addressed in Judges chapters 4 and 5. And this Deborah, she's called in verse number 4 a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth. And she judged Israel at that time. This is a female judge that God brought on the scene. And evidently, of course, He qualified her. He enabled her. He made her the kind of woman that she was, of the kind of stuff that she is made of. That's God that put her together, put her thinking together, her way of approaching life. And some women kind of stand out with a difference from other women. And I suppose that's the way that Deborah was. But God had her as a prophetess. She had a particular place where she did God's business. And people would come in to get a word from the Lord from this woman, or they would come in for judicial disputes or whatever. She was a wise woman. She was considered to be, according to some commentators, one of the wisest women of Old Testament times. And so she had to deal one-on-one with people and decide for them when they had disputes among the Hebrew people and such. But she was strategically placed at that time where she could rise to the occasion that God had waiting for her. And so she was prepared for it mentally. She was prepared for it physically. She was prepared for it spiritually in every way. This woman was ready for the job. And she's going to use a man to kind of lead the troops, but yet she's going to be the ruler of it. And Barak is going to take his orders from her because she's taken her orders from the Lord. Matter of fact, Barak states, he said, I'm not going to go unless you go with me. That's what he told her. And she said, I'm going with you. And so she was not afraid. She was courageous. And she was ready to do whatever had to be done to free the Hebrew people. Because she was a patriot. She was a patriot. She loved her nation. She loved the Hebrew people. She loved the Lord. She loved the Lord first. And she wanted the Hebrew people to be freed from their sinfulness, their apostasy, their idolatry, everything that had them in bondage, but also from the pagan enemy. She wanted them to be free. She is a woman, it would do you good to just sit, read through these chapters a number of times, and then sit down and just think about her. Just give her some thought. I'm afraid we're missing a lot by our failure in meditation. And that's where you bring back up from your heart, from the mind of your heart, the truths that you've been reading, and you just rehash them. You just go over and over in your mind about them, and just kind of let your mind flow freely, and try to picture, watch her maybe sometimes in your own thinking. You may be way out in left field, but kind of watch her as she does her judicial work, and as she does her work as a prophetess as well. But Deborah could not only prophesy, she could rouse people up, get them stirred up. She could get a crowd together because they knew the woman. They knew the kind of woman that she was. And I believe that they had confidence in her. She didn't live two or three different ways out in public before the people. I think she tried to live what she taught from the script, or taught from God's revelations to her of truth. She tried to live right. She walked what she taught and talked what she walked. And so the people had confidence. She could get them stirred up. She was able to rule well, to give proper wisdom to the people. She was able to fight well. There's no doubt she knew how to wield a sword, how to throw a dagger, how to sling a spear or a stone or whatever. She just knew how to fight. And any man that was going to face her among those pagans, they were going to have a tough time. But of course her main weapon was the Lord God Himself, who stood with her and directed her, and He greatly used her. Don't sell women short, friend, because God has had special positions for women. We can read it throughout the Holy Scriptures and even see it throughout history. God has had some strong women. I think about, I'm about to get it, Margaret Thatcher. When she was Prime Minister over in Great Britain, they called her, if I remember it right, the Iron Lady. And she took a pretty solid stand. I guess, I wouldn't say for the most part, maybe so, but I know she was a very, very, very close friend of our President Ronald Reagan at the time, and he greatly admired her, I know that. And there have been others as well, Joan of Arc and others that we could probably name. May not agree with a lot of things concerning them, but we know that they were fearless female fighters. And that's a way that we find about what we find about Deborah. It was said of Julius Caesar that he wrote with the same ability with which he fought. And that's the way that Deborah was when we read, if indeed she did write that poem in chapter 5, she was well capable and able of writing as well. And so there are two women in this storyline account that could carry the title heroine. I don't mean the drug. I'm talking about ladies who have rose to the occasion in difficult times in history. Women noted for courageous acts or nobility of character. Women who have been able to perform great achievements, abilities, women with personal qualities, and are regarded by many as role models. There are few women like that and few men like that. I really don't think that we have near as many heroes in our days as the media tries to present. I don't think that that's the case. I think the real hero is the one who has had time to count the cost and really give a little time of thought to what they are about to enter into. These are the people who knows what it may cost them, which could even be their own life, or even be mangled for the rest of their life or whatever. And so there have been very few of those. Somebody said see if I can get this right, when heroes go off the stage, then comedians come on the stage. I think we got a whole lot more comedians today on the stage than we do heroes. And but anyway, here are two women that were definitely heroes. The first one's Deborah, as we've mentioned. Herbert Lockyer, he called her a female Oliver Cromwell of ancient Israel, who went out to fight the Lord's battles with a psalm on her lips and a sword in her hand. And then the second lady, I can't hardly wait to introduce you to her, Jael. She's a woman who will give you more than you ask for. The Bible said that Captain Sisera of the pagan Canaanites asked for water, and she gave him milk. And that wasn't seal test and Medigold milk. I'll tell you, it was a milk specially prepared for the enemy. And when he got totally helpless in his stupor that it brought him to, she was able to easily handle him, and she took him out real quick and real easy. One other thing I'd like to say about Deborah, in light of everything I've said concerning her, it was interesting. I looked up what her name Deborah means. And the name Deborah means bee. Bee. Not B-E. B-E-E. It means bee. And she could be a honeybee, and she could be a hornet. Whatever was necessary at the time. For her friends, she loved producing honey. She loved giving them what they needed. And that's what she was doing for the Hebrew people. The best friend that you have is somebody who will not only give you a holy kiss, but even be willing at times to give you a holy wound. And that is a soft rebuke, a kind rebuke that would save them from heartache down the line. That's why you know that a mother loves her children and a father loves his children when they will do that hard love stuff. You know, at times, give whatever's necessary to get them off the wrong track and get them back on the right track. And I think that a preacher will do that as well. There are times we have to preach hard, and it's tough. And it's tough even on the preacher if he's not trying to be hateful, but rather he's just trying to obey God and trying to help the people. I never have cared for hateful preaching, but hard preaching is good because it's necessary for all of us to get wandering sheep back on the right path again and correct our bad ways. But honey is necessary at times as well for the friends. But Deborah could also be a hornet. And so that would make it rough on the enemy. And she certainly was. She packed a fatal sting that paralyzed her adversaries. And she did what was necessary in order to put things in the proper place and put her people on top. Mary Hallett, I don't know her, but she made the right statement about her. She said, "Science confirms the ancient belief that of all the animal kingdom, the bee ranks among the highest in intelligence." And that could be so. I know I've seen some mighty smart bees. And some of the work that they do is absolutely amazing for those little creatures. And I'm sure that Deborah was a very wise lady. And I'll just say this quickly. Jael, her name comes from a Hebrew root that means a wild goat. And it means to ascend, like goats that climb the cliffs and are well balanced and sure-footed. Now, I do not mean by that Jael is necessarily a woman to be so much admired, because she was, after all, a Hittite, and she was not a Hebrew. And we don't know her motive for what she did as she stepped somewhat into the battle there in her tent with Captain Sisera. But it could have been just to put herself on in good with Deborah and Barak. I don't know for certain. I cannot know her motives unless the Scriptures states them. But anyway, again, she was not somebody just to be to cross, because she could be hard to handle. Let's look at the study here in the verses, verse 1 and 2. "And the children of Israel again," this is their pattern now, "they again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud, the last judge, died." He was the third judge. Verse 2, "And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose host was Sisera." And I want you to keep Sisera in mind, because he's very important in our study. "Which dwelt in Harosheth of the Gentiles. And the children of Israel, after they were taken into bondage by those Canaanites, the children of Israel cried unto the Lord as they suffered in that bondage. Because Sisera, Captain Sisera, had 900 chariots of iron. And 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. And Deborah, now we're introduced to her. There was one other Deborah in the Scriptures, earlier in the Scriptures. She was Isaac's wife, Rebekah. Deborah, her name Deborah. She was a nursemaid, a handmaid to Rebekah, and she had been for many, many years. She died when she was nearly 100 years old, and they spoke of her like she was one of their family, and very much loved. She was a very busy kind of woman. Stayed right there. She was there, of course, when Jacob and Esau were born. But anyway, let's get back to the study here. Verse 4 tells us about this Deborah here, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth. And that's about all they have to say about Lapidoth. He's in a family that I guess you could say rode in the second chariot. That's probably what they would say back in that day. I guess we would call it, he played second fiddle. You know, second fiddle is just as needed as the first fiddle. Isn't that right, brother? I can't think of your name. Brother Coffee. I love coffee. I don't know why I couldn't think of it.
Am I in trouble again?
No, sir. No, sir. You understand the importance of first fiddle and second fiddle, of both of them coming together and playing. The whole orchestra, even if you're not taking the lead, every part fits. It all fits together. Brother Coffee can tell you about that because he's been in the business of organizing orchestras and teaching music. He taught my granddaughter Rebecca guitar for a good while. And he's an excellent teacher. But some people say, I want to take the lead. But many times it's that person who comes in occasionally that really somewhat stands out at times. I love to hear a flute as it comes in, you know, kind of Irish style or Scottish style or whatever. And it really adds to the songs or to the hymns. And that's the kind of man that this man, Lapidoth, was. And he kind of let his wife be up front. Well, the position God had her in was for the glory of God. And God may have had many different reasons for using this woman in this particular place. And this was a rare thing. It was a rare thing for God to call women and put them into such a place as this. But that's exactly what the Lord did. So I don't question the Lord on that. He's the boss. He's in charge. He can do anything He wants to. And if He had my wife playing first fiddle, I'd be happy to play second fiddle. And I don't mean by that I'd stand by and let her get up here behind the pulpit. But I do mean by that I'd let her pay the bills. And such as that, you know. But evidently she had a good husband here, and I just thought I'd mention him. I don't want him standing too deep in the shadows. But she judged Israel at this time. Verse number 5, Deborah dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah. She even had a palm tree named for her and in honor of her. And this was a particular palm tree. What I read some of the people said that back during this particular time, there were not that many palm trees around in the areas. Now, Jericho was called the city of palms because evidently they had quite a number there. But in this particular area, just few. And here is one. And this is where either Deborah lived, and that seems to be noted by the word dwelt. She dwelt there. She may have lived there at that palm tree, or that may have been where she met and done her business as a judge and where people would meet with her. That may be it. But when people spoke of the palm of Deborah, everybody knew what they were talking about. It was named for her and in honor to her. And it was between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. Verse 6. And she sent and called Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kadesh Naphtali, and said unto him, Hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and draw, that is, deploy your troops toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali, and of the children of Zebulun. Now, this is interesting to me. I looked over in Hebrews chapter 11 because I remembered reading Barak's name there among the heroes of faith. And I remember reading Sarai's name there, and even Rahab's name there, some of the women. But I didn't remember seeing Deborah's name there. And so I thought I'd go over and check to see if I missed it. But it wasn't there. And I really don't know why it wasn't. But Barak's name was there. And Barak's the one who said, I'm not going unless you go with me. But the Lord, maybe He didn't want us to make too much of the fact that He uses a woman here. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But she takes the lead in this particular battle to get the Hebrew people freed. And so I just thought I'd mention that. I don't have the answer to that, but something to think about. Verse 7. And she says to Barak, And I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon. Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. And so a plan is being made here. Deborah says, whatever means she's going to use, she's going to see to it that this captain of Jabin's army is going to be brought to this river Kishon. And there he will become an open target, as it were, for Barak and his troops, that they can take him out. That's her thinking. But now, of course, God has other plans. And it's going to be during this time. We don't read it in this historic chapter here, but we do read it in the poetic chapter, in chapter 5, that there's going to be a major rainstorm that's going to hit. And it's going to be a blinding rainstorm. And this may be something that would hinder these people. Maybe the Lord had told her that there would be a blinding rainstorm. I don't know if He had or not. But to her, this seemed to be the proper place to bring him. He would be an open target, and Barak could take care of him, get him out of the picture. And so she said, I'll deliver him into your hand. Verse 8, Barak said unto her, If thou wilt go with me, then I will go, but if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with thee. Notwithstanding the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honor. Well, we're going to learn a little something right here. It's not going to be for thine honor, for the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. So God did tell her that a woman's going to take care of it. May have told her the woman's name, Jael. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, the tribes to Kadesh. And he went up with 10,000 men at his feet, and Deborah went up with him. Now they're outnumbered. There are going to be more Canaanites, more enemy, than there are going to be among Barak's troops. They've got about 10,000. Historians tell us the other crowd may have had as many as 100,000 that will come down upon them. Deborah understands that, but she's not afraid. She's ready to fight. She already knows who's going to win. God's already told her that He's going to take care of this problem with the enemy. And so, and not only that, but they had that Captain Sisera, and he had at least 20 years experience. He was a fighter. He was a warrior, not a man to be reckoned with. He was tough. But not only that, he had, 900 chariots of iron. He was well equipped. And he was tough. He was a George Patton of the hour. If you ran, he'd slap you cross-eyed, you know. We know Mr. Patton had a problem with that and got in trouble with Truman over that. Verse 11, Now Heber the Kenite, which was of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, had severed or separated himself from the Kenites and pitched his tent under the plain of Zanaim, which is by Kadesh. And they showed Sisera that Barak the son of Abinoam was gone up to Mount Tabor. And Sisera gathered together all his chariots, even 900 chariots of iron, and all the people that were with him from Harosheth of the Gentiles under the river of Kishon. And Deborah said unto Barak, Up, or arise, for this is the day in which the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. And the Lord discomfited. He routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his host with the edge of the sword before Barak, so that Sisera lighted down off his chariot and he ran. You're General Patton running now. He fled away on his feet. Verse 16, But Barak pursued after the chariots and after the host unto Harosheth of the Gentiles, and all the host of Sisera fell upon the edge of the sword, and there was not a man left. So the 10,000 took care of the 100,000, or however many that there were, and brought them down, because this was God's will at work. Now look at verse 17. Howbeit, Sisera seems to have got away. He fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber. Here's that second heroine. The wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin and King Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera. Now she's already made a plan. Evidently she's either looks out the tent flap and sees him out there, or somebody has told her he's out there. Whatever the case is, she runs out there. She's got it in her mind what she's going to do. She went out to meet Sisera and said unto him, Turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. I'll take care of you, I'll look after you, I'll watch for you, I'll make certain nothing happens to you. That's her words somewhat to him. Verse 18, And when he had turned in unto her into the tent, she covered him with a mantle. She covered him up with a cover or a rug or something. And he said to her, I can see him lay back on that pallet, that bed, whatever. And he's weary, he's tired, he's been in the battle, he's been on the run. And so he needs to rest, he's weary. And he looks up at her and he says, I'm thirsty. I want you to bring me some water, verse 19. Give me, I pray, a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him drink. And then she covered him back up. Now, did she put something in that milk? Or did she warm that milk? Some people, if they have a problem sleeping at night, I'll hear of them drinking warm milk. I don't even want to think about that. But I hear them drinking warm milk, and certainly a baby delights in it, doesn't it? A warm milk. And so she gives him whatever it was. It's going to work on him. It'll either do it naturally or she's got some kind of drug in it, whatever the case. And so she gives to him more than he asked for. And he's going to get a whole lot more than he asked for. Verse 20. Again he said unto her, stand in the door of the tent. I need you to stand guard for me. And it shall be when any man doeth come and inquire of thee, ask you any questions, maybe about where I am or whatever, and say, is there any man here? Thou shalt say, no. Keep me hidden. And he's going to depend on her to do that. Verse 21, then Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent and took a hammer in her hand. I wonder while he was going to sleep, if maybe the wind was kind of picking up a little bit. There had been a rainstorm close by. Maybe the wind was still picking up somewhat. Maybe she could hear a flap of the canvas out there, or the hide, whatever the tent was. But could hear it maybe flapping in the breeze. And maybe some of his last thoughts, I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Maybe some of his last thoughts were, I wonder if the nail has come loose. If it's come loose from the nail and it's flapping in the wind, and I guess we'll have to take care of that when I get back up. And then he dozes right on off to sleep. He didn't know that Jael had gone out and got that nail up and brought it in. Of course, it could have been an extra nail laying in the tent there itself. But I like to think of it, of her going out and pulling that nail up out of the ground and taking that hammer. And she takes it in and puts the point of it down almost to his temple. And she rears back with that hammer. Bam! And drives it through his temple, through his head, into the ground. She nails his head to the ground. What a way to go. Again, verse 21, Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent, took a hammer in her hand, went softly, carefully to him, quietly, and smote the nail into his temples, and fastened it into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary, so he died right there. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said unto him, come, and I will show thee the man whom thou seekest. And when he came into her tent, behold, Sisera lay dead, and the nail was in his temples. So God subdued on that day Jabin, the king of Canaan, before the children of Israel. And the hand of the children of Israel prospered and prevailed against Jabin, the king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. God gave them the victory. I'm not going to read this next chapter. There are just a couple of high spots that I want you to take note of. He said in verses 1 through 3, Then sang Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, on that day, and here's the song that they sung. Verse 2, Praise ye the Lord for the avenging of Israel, when the people willingly offered themselves. Hear, O ye kings, give ear, O ye princes. I, even I, will sing unto the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. I just want it again for you to see this woman giving credit where it should have been given. And that is to the Lord. She didn't take it to herself. She didn't say, look what I've done. They didn't build a monument to Deborah or to Barak, but rather both of these leaders sang together this great hymn of praise unto God, this anthem of praise unto God, because God is the one who wrought the victory for Israel. So that's always good to know, that people are giving God the praise for the good things that have taken place. Verse 7 said, The inhabitants of the villages ceased. They are continuing to sing. They ceased in Israel until that I, Deborah, arose. That I arose, a mother in Israel. Now this is what she is known as. This is what she is called. A mother of Israel. It's a name of honor given to special, prominent Hebrew women who served particularly well, above and beyond their call. And so she's able to sing about this, but she's giving God the glory for it all. An old mother of Israel. If you ever hear that term, I understand the people of Israel would use it even to this day. They're giving honor to that particular lady. And then verse 20, they're continuing to sing. They fought from heaven. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. And then they give the understanding here. This is poetic speech now, don't forget. The river of Kishon swept them away. That ancient river, the river Kishon, O my soul, thou hast trodden down strength. And so this is where we get the idea that the victory came from the heavens, came from the furthest heaven, the Lord Himself, of course, but also possibly the rains and such coming down in the atmosphere and crippling, as it were, Jabin's troops and Sisera's army. And so this is where God helped Barak and Deborah. Then verse 24, Blessed above women shall Jael, they sang, shall Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, be. Blessed shall she be above women in the tent. Jael, Brother Ronnie, she had a tent ministry. And the Lord moved in power, and they had a shouting time. Verse 25, they sang about it. They said Sisera asked for water, and she gave him milk. She brought forth butter, the curds of the milk, in a lordly dish. A fabulous looking dish, one well formed, something that you use to serve other people with honor. And so Sisera thought, look at this, I'm getting the red carpet service. But he didn't know she was setting him up for assassination. Verse 26, they kept singing. She put her hand to the nail, her right hand to the workman's hammer, and with a hammer she smote Sisera. Now remember, this is poetically speaking. She smote off his head. She's showing the intensity of the hammer's blow. I mean, she put his head out of business. Just like you would cut a man's head off. That'd be the end of him. But again, this is poetic wording that she's using. She didn't cut his head off, but she did put it out of business. She smote Sisera, she smote off his head when she had pierced and stricken through his temples. Verse 27, at her feet he bowed. He fell, he laid down. At her feet he bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell down dead. Now, is this talking about, she said, lie down here on this bed. That's where he was so exhausted, as it were, it's almost like he collapsed. He bowed and then he laid over. Is that what he's talking about? Or is this a strike of the nail and he tries to get up to his feet, maybe for just a moment? He was still alive. Was he struggling? Is this a man struggling to get back up and to defend himself? I don't know which one that would be, and it may not be either. Because again, they're singing from their hearts with words that are not always that easy to understand, because poetry is not always that easy to understand. But whatever the case, it's easy to see what is happening to Sisera. Verse 28, the mother of Sisera. They're singing about something else. Now watch this. The mother of Sisera looked out at a window. In other words, she is at home and she looks out the window and she cries through the lattice, where's Sisera? Why is his chariot so long in coming home? Surely the battle's over by now. Why tarry the wheels of his chariot? Where's my boy? Why hasn't he got back yet? She don't know what's going on at Jael's tent. And so Deborah and Barak is singing about a mother looking for her son. It's a type of ballad that they're singing. But what she don't know at this point is her son is not coming home. Verse 29, her wise ladies answered her. Yea, she returned answer to herself. Have they not sped? That is, have they not found? Have they not divided the prey? Have they found all the spoil? All the stuff that belonged to the Hebrew people? Maybe the soldiers are still dividing it up among themselves. To every man a damsel or two, taking even their wives, daughters. To Sisera, a prey of divers color, a prey of divers colors of needlework, of diverse colors of needlework on both sides, meat for the necks, fit for the necks of them that take the spoil. Maybe they're still dividing up all the stuff, the soldiers, after they've defeated them all. Maybe that's why my son is running late. And so even Deborah and Barak is supposing some things here. Verse 31, so let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, as they are winding up the song. But let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might. That's the end of the song. The last one is a historical statement. And the land had rest 40 years. And so, do you understand why we would put these two chapters together in our study of this evening? Because they say practically the same thing, just with a different kind of wording. And the prose in chapter 4 and the poetry in chapter 5. All right, thank you. We'll stop right there. All right, as we pray,